Hi, everybody. This is the maiden voyage of, spill the wine, dig that girl. I know some people say, don't sing, please. Yes. Anyways, it's a brand new podcast, and my name is Leroy Guilford. So some people are like, okay, there's a gazillion podcasts out there. What gives it with you? Well, some people may know my voice. Here in Southern California, I've been on commercial talk radio stations on and off over the years with a show called Wine Country Talk Radio. And I love to always tell the stories behind the wine. So my focus is typically finding people who are jumping in with all their passion, all their love to go for it and make some lovely wine that you can splash, spill the wine into your glass. So from now on, these next couple of weeks, we're going to see where we go. And my home stomping ground has always been Southern California, kind of where I hang out a lot. Some of you may come in and see me occasionally at Navarro Family Vineyards, where I've been for 10 years and heard my radio show in times past. This is the podcast, and today we are starting out with Mr. Rafael Navarro. And Rafael, I'm going to welcome you here to, now I have to get ready not to say Wine Country Talk Radio, but Spill the Wine. Okay, so welcome to Spill the Wine.
Well, thank you, and let's hope we don't spill too much wine.
I'm kind of thinking the other way around. If we can keep these glasses full. Now, I have teased people in the past with this. You know, one of the fun things about having a wine talk show is you get to drink the wine with the winemakers themselves and hear the stories behind it. So that's exactly what we're going to explore. Now, we would be remiss if we didn't also mention that although he doesn't have a microphone sitting beside him, we're in the presence of winemaking royalty, Dr. Enrique Ferro, and he's been a guy who's been in the wine industry for years and years and years and hails with many degrees in enology and viticulture, and we brought him along to follow up with us on the studio here and make sure we're telling everything correctly, right, Dr. Ferro? So he's just nodding his head. Right. So. I'll let you know what kind of background this guy has, okay? Now, Dr. Ferro been in our Temecula Valley for almost 40 or 40 plus years, but aside from all of his incredible degrees in enology and viticulture and all the other stuff that goes with understanding how to make great wine, Audrey and Vinny Salurzo were our founding patriarchs way back in 1968 in the Temecula Valley. And the guy who advised them and was part of their winemaking team for many years, matter of fact, they used to sign the back of the bottles, Try Pisani, okay? The three friends or the three brothers, what was that? Anyways, if you wondered who would name their kid Try Pisani, well, actually it was Dr. Enrique Ferro and Vinny Salurzo, and a young guy who still hangs out in our valley with his own winery, Don Frangipani. So, but bringing it full circle, we got a brand new wine coming on board, and it is the Navarro Family Wines. And so I'm going to throw the ball to you, literally, Rafael, and let's talk about why. What brought you here? Now, you got an interesting background. I saw the UCLA the little license plate frames when you rolled up your garage door, and I saw several, not just one, several Porsches. So let's start with the background of your car thing first, okay?
Well, it kind of goes hand in hand, I think, right? Nice cars, fine wine, fine meals.
Fine women, all kinds of other things, right?
Well, I was going to leave that out, but yeah, it all goes, it's a lifestyle thing, and I've been pretty fortunate over the years. I had a great career thanks to UCLA. Mm-hmm. That got me down the right path. I was able to do the things I wanted to do. As my dad said, I had a love for cars as a child. We'll blame it on being a child of 1968, which I was born the same year Hot Wheels was born. Right.
So, I played with lots of Hot Wheels.
So did I, and I was very fortunate that my parents had friends that worked at the factory when they were actually building those little toys here in the U.S. And a lot of those little toys made it over to my parents' house when I was born. So at a certain point, those things kind of led me down a path, and cars were in my blood. My father always told me that cars were never going to lead me anywhere. That I needed.
Now, hold on. I bet you got to play with prototypes of Hot Wheels before they hit the market, huh?
Most certainly did. The most interesting thing is that I still have them.
Oh, awesome.
So,
hey, now, there you go, a Hot Wheels collection. Yeah, well, you can put that on eBay, right?
Yeah,
So-
well, yeah. I'm not going to give away any secrets, but you saw a lot of the real Hot Wheels in the garage.
Yep.
I have Hot Wheels that probably equal the price of what's in the garage.
Oh, my gosh.
So,
Wow.
but
How
anyway,
fun.
that's another story. We're here to talk about
Yes,
wine.
it is. So, all right. Now, you have some lovely vineyards on your estate in Los Ranchitos, which is kind of more known for horses up on the hills of Temecula. And you got some lovely vineyards there. So let's explore that, because you were actually, well, let's talk first a little bit. We are sipping this lovely Brunello style Sangiovese at this very moment. So we need a little proof here. Yep, there they are. And let's talk a little bit about that.
Yeah,
And then tell us the story. Okay. How the vines came about, how the winemaking came about, and what got you to take the leap to do that? Because it does take a leap.
Well, the interesting thing about in your intro, as you said it, Dr. Ferro's been working in the Temecula Valley for over 40 years, and the reason why I was able to reconnect with the esteemed Dr. Ferro is because I moved. My father moved the family to Temecula in 1976, back when there was one four-corner stop sign, a few lakes, and a lot of citrus trees and some fledgling, wineries at the time.
And only one that was a tasting room, but 5 of our originals were all there by that point in time. So I have to throw this in because it's just fun. So at Audrey and Vinny Salurzo, of course, everyone knows Ely Callaway. But then there was, a lot of people don't know what the rest of the lineup was, but the first 5 guys, then we had Joe Hart, Doc Filsinger, and little old Barrett Bird with Santa Margarita Winery. Those are the guys who all claim to be the first 5.
And
so I run with what they say.
And I don't remember much, but I do remember going to grade school with Shannon Salurzo and Vinny Salurzo and back in the day. So, back then there was also a family there working at Mount Palomar Winery, Peter Poole.
Yes, Peter
the
and
Poole family.
Yep, and he was the son of John, and John actually, his dad, got his money from owning KBIG AM and FM, and back in the day, KBIG AM used to carry the Indy 500 races off of 740 AM. It's been KBRT out of Avalon for many years, but that was the big thing, man. He brought his broadcast money, kind of like Vinny Salurzo.
Right, and so the Peter and company were involved in the Lions Club. My dad was very active in the Lions Club. They, friends with Doc Ferro and so on and so forth. So back then, I wasn't thinking wine, but it was interesting that I had that contact and connection, which, as you fast forward in time, and you look at how I came back and reconnected with the Valley through wine. We started talking about my schooling in UCLA, which opened a door to me to start a career in the tire business, because it was a way for me to get into motorsport through tires.
And then you worked for this tiny little fledgling tire company, right?
Well, I wouldn't say it was fledgling, but before I go to where I really found my groove and lifestyle and developed an affinity for culture and let's say all things Italian, I started my career with BF Goodrich and Michelin. So I was a little bit on the French side, and I put in some years there, and along the line the Italians said, hey, we'd like to have some of you come over with us and do some work. And I put in 15 years with Pirelli, and it was a wonderful, wonderful experience. I'm very thankful for that experience. I like I said, the Italians, being of Latin heritage myself, Mexican American, I found myself at home with them, and through them I learned how to enjoy life, how to eat well, how to dress well, and how to drink amazing wine. And you
Now,
know, the
now
most,
I have to ask you, so with your time with Pirelli, did you spend a lot of time in Italy?
absolutely.
Okay.
I mean, there was
I mean, that was kind of a no-brainer.
no,
but,
it's a
yeah,
no-brainer. I mean, that was part of it. I mean, I still remember my first trip with Gianluca Grioni, who was assigned to make sure that I found my way to the right meetings and didn't get lost, and I got to spend a weekend with his family. And I think I fell in love with all things Italian from that first weekend with Gianluca and his family. I'll never forget that in my life as long as I live.
So the seed was planted. By the way, folks, you're listening. Yes, this is the maiden voyage of Spill the Wine. Yeah, some of you remember that old song, huh? But that's the inspiration for this podcast. And my name's Leroy Guilford. I'm your host. And we have Rafael Navarro, and we're talking about what made him come about to, by the way, we're sipping this yummy wine that you're going to be able to get your hands on here very soon. How that all came about and what made him take the dive. As it's said in our industry, if you want to make a fortune, you better start with a much bigger fortune. We'll put that in numbers. They say if you want to make 2 million, start with at least 4 million.
Right.
So yeah, it does take a little roll of the dice, or at least a lot of blood, sweat, and tears. So.
Absolutely.
All right, so picking up where we just left off. So you spending time in Italy.
So spent a lot of time in Italy. Got to know the different regions. Got to drink a lot of great wine. Most importantly, it wasn't on my nickel. I got to expense it. But you know that's just a joke. It's an aside. But nonetheless, I was very fortunate. I was able to find what I really liked, what I really enjoyed. As time went on, I got to the point where I enjoyed it so much that I started thinking, you know, I do live in the Temecula Valley, and I have seen this town develop, the region grow into a point where there's people coming in and making a ton of money, and arguably, you know, you could say there's some okay wines in the valley, but there's a lot of not so okay wines. And I'm going, you know, if people are putting out what they're putting out, why the hell can't I do it? Because I like it that much, and
I need to interject, because when we talk about, we want to be gracious to all of our friends in our valley here, but let's face it, it's the old 20-80 that exists in life.
Well,
20% produce the cream of the crop, and the other 80% they kind of, and you know, those of us hopefully that really love wine, we like to drink the 80%. Not that we can always afford it, but you know, folks, if you have your own wine talk show, you get the winemaker to bring his wine in, and you don't have to buy it. But there's a flip side to the coin. It costs money to do a podcast and a radio show, so it's a two-sided coin here for sure. So let's continue on with that. You're making the plunge, and you, I would dare say, are looking to be in that upper echelon, the 80%.
Well,
so those of us that, you know, love to drink wine, and occasionally we're going to spend the extra bucks for the something special. Not all the time, but you know,
my intention wasn't to put
Yes.
heat on anybody or point fingers. You noticed I didn't name any names. But let's be real. I mean, there's been a lot of foreign investment. When I say
Yes.
foreign, it's outside of Temecula. Who can really tell the story? They've been in the valley for 40 years and are making wine and selling it to consumers and bringing them in and giving them quality product. For me, a lot of it is entertainment. I know. I've lived out there, and the amount of traffic. I mean, that's why I found the property that I'm living at now that you visited, and I've planted grapes there. It became a hassle and a zoo to commute in and out of where I used to live, out in the wine country. So I'm like, you know, this is insane.
You might as well just camp out in wine country. Right?
Well, if that's what you're going to do. But like you said, if you're going to make wine, it takes money to make money. So you got to get out and work and get a real job to pay for it.
So those of you who are familiar with Southern California, if you've ever been to the Temecula Valley, our particular stomping grounds that we're talking about wine about, he lives in a place where he looks right through the Rainbow Gap. Now, in our valley, we have some things that make some incredible dimensions to our wine grape farming, in the sense of how the weather and the temperature and the whole overall system of cool air at night and warm toasty air in the daytime. And the Rainbow Gap is where, for those of you who are familiar, at least here in Southern California, drive on the 15 freeway and climb up out of the Temecula Valley and pass over into into San Diego County. And Rainbow Mountain is it's kind of like a little saddle, and the bottom of the saddle is where the freeway runs through, and we that's known as the Rainbow Gap. Along with just slightly to the east of Rainbow Mountain, there's a little valley that runs down by the Pechanga folks there and ends up in the San Luis Rey Valley of the river that goes down to Oceanside. And there's a lot of cool moist air that gets to come up at nighttime through there. And the other would be, we'd be remiss if we didn't say the Santa Margarita River and the little Temecula Canyon that comes through right by the end of Old Town. And those bring in a lot of our magic, moist, cool air at nighttime. And where he happens to reside, you can spy both of those little special views from his vineyard, which is kind of a special little deal there, if I may say so.
Yes, that location was defined as the primary reason why I bought it. And it has, on the property, it has its own little 2 microclimates. You know, we have a lower property that's loamy and the soil's really fertile, and it goes up towards the back and it builds up, and it's on a hill, you know, facing the southeast to get the morning sun. And it's an interesting, you know, result that you get out of it, kind of a dichotomy of the 2 locations where we have the vines on the property. So it's an interesting effect on the grapes, you know, that kind of puts together. And the wine I'm making is 100% Sangiovese. Right? We don't blend with any other varietal. It's 100% Brunello clone. And so that's the beauty of the project we're working on.
Let's take a little tangent and talk about that, because we were speaking about this, that the Brunello varieties of Sangiovese that come out of Italy versus what we're actually able to call it, you know, if we're not in Italy, in this case where we are in the Temecula Valley, California. Talk a little bit about that. So you're making a Brunello, you're growing a Brunello clone. Let people know what that is, okay, because not all of us that drink wine necessarily understand all the stuff about the wine grape farming. And then in your case, the way you're specifically targeting, turning that into that style of wine.
Yeah, commercially, people are most familiar with the Sangiovese grape varietal in a Chianti, okay? And the Sangiovese grape, it's in a Sangiovese Grosso. So that's the family of grape that it's in. When you start talking specifically the Brunello clone, that is a varietal. If you look at Sangiovese as a family of grapes, there's over 200 different varietals in Italy.
Right.
Okay. When you start narrowing it down and you start looking at what they make Brunello, this type of wine that my wine is patterned after.
Right.
There are maybe 20 different clones that are mainly found in the Montalcino area, okay, in Tuscany. So that's what I fell in love with and what I wanted to create. With the registration laws, the DOC laws that protect particular varietals and from their regions and respecting that, the wine that I'm making can't be called Brunello because I'm making it outside of the registered region. Okay, so that's why I'm saying I have a Brunello like wine, okay, in my descriptors.
And just for those who, you know, you drink wine in general, but you love to learn about it, think of champagne. You know, all throughout California now it's called California sparkling wine. You can't call it champagne because that's trademarked unless you've been grandfathered in and they made all of the edicts about what you have to follow to remain grandfathered in, almost impossible to follow. So almost everybody's given up. But every once in a while you walk into particularly the grocery store and there's a couple big name producers who've managed to just keep the label and everything they do totally the same so they can say California champagne. But he's speaking of a situation where, because of trademarks and international law, we can talk all about it and call it whatever we want. We just can't put it in print on our
Yeah,
bottle.
just on the label, I have to label this as a Sangiovese wine. made in the Temecula Valley, which is fine.
So we could almost say it's a Brunello di Temecula Valley.
Yeah, something
if we
like
could,
that.
if we could get away with that, right? So okay. Now the Brunello particular style and that clone, my perception of it is, and I've drank a fair amount of wines, is it's a little heartier than the other Sangioveses. Is that a correct perception on my part?
Yeah, it's a little more full body, and I think that the style also as well. Chianti, it doesn't sit in French oak as much. Okay, the Brunello sits in French oak for about a year is what we've been doing. And at the end of the day, I think the wine we have is, high acid, which is what you're looking for and what you get out of a Sangiovese wine,
which I just took a sip of.
This
Leaving
wine,
my mouth salivating, which makes it a great food wine.
it has a great aroma, great bouquet, has a little bit of the spices that you find and vanillin that you find in a nice toasted barrel, and the wine is very progressive and finishes very nice on the palate.
Okay, so we're doing lots of teasing right now. People are going, oh my gosh, this sounds really great. Where can I get it? So let's talk about the next step, because now you're getting ready to make the full plunge. You're going to dive in the deep end and actually move to retailing your wine. So let's talk a little bit about first the history of what you have libraried. Okay, the wines you've created and bottled and now storing, that process, and then what are your hopes for the future and the ideas about where you would like to at least initially market it? And I need to interject right now and just say this is my old, being on broadcast radio, guess what? We would always watch the time clock. And I know podcasts, you don't have to watch the time clock as much, but you're listening to the brand new podcast. Yeah, it's called Spill the Wine, and it's the Spill the Wine Show /podcast. And I'm primarily a Southern California guy, but we're going to talk about wines from whenever I get people willing to talk about them themselves. So I am Leroy Guilford, your host, and we are sitting here actually in Carlsbad, California, in these incredibly gorgeous studios. Now, when you say studios, does that sound like many? Actually, we're in a studio, but it's a music studio that actually my son put together, and we're christening it with the Spill the Wine podcast. So I think we should dump some wine all over the floor yet before we leave. Okay. So all right, let's talk about that next set. All right, because somehow people got to be able to get a hold of your wines, and you're in the process of designing all that right now.
Yeah, I think we're about ready to put this into the market. And again, I'm very grateful to my mentor in this project, the esteemed Dr. Ferro.
Okay, so come here for a minute, Dr. Ferro, if you can get up, because you have to hear Enrique. We translate for him because as long as he's been in America, he still sounds very Italian. Okay, say hello, Dr. Ferro. So
hi, I just want to say a few things. The topography of Temecula Valley is very unique with soft hills. So it's a hilly area where there is different expositions to the sunlight, and we choose the varieties that will be able to develop better in that terroir. And what is terroir? Terroir, it came from actually the Romans. They call it with a different name in Latin, which identifies the topography, the altitude, the exposition to the sunlight, closeness to a big ocean, Mediterranean or Pacific Ocean. And we are blessed with the Pacific Ocean because with the cold climate, cold currents that come from Alaska, it cools down the valley of Temecula, and at night in the summer we get 60 degrees Fahrenheit. That's when we harvest the grapes at night, and they preserve all the flavors and all the aromas at the point when we are going to crush the grapes.
And let me tell you, folks, the reason a lot of people love to head down here, not just to grow grapes and make wine, but our beautiful climate is, as Dr. Ferro was just talking about, if you drive 20 minutes in any direction out of our Temecula Valley. Let's say today, here we are in the middle of August, okay, in the year 2021, of course. And where we were today, not quite 90 degrees, about 87, and a little bit higher humidity. But if you went 10, 15, 20 minutes in any direction out of this valley, you're going to see almost a 10-degree increase in temperature. So I lived for many years up the road in Hemet, just, 25-minute drive, and yet we could be 10 and 20 degrees hotter throughout much of the day without the coolness at night. And it's that magic of warm, toasty days and cool nights that make the wine grape growing climate. And that's why our little specific, what we call American viticultural area, it's a boundary that the associations of all the different wineries agree on, fit all the dimensions of what we were calling terroir and the climate and all the things that make it right for growing grapes. And if you grow them in this area, you can put that on your label, and that would be like Napa and Sonoma and Temecula Valley and all the other ones you've heard of. Okay. And that's why we're talking specifically right now about this, is because it is the magic. And in this case, I want to talk, before we actually get into the marketing thing, let's go back to your grapes planted on the property. Let's talk about the age of them and how you decided what you were going to put there and how you were going to trellis them. So folks, when we talk about the way we're growing grapes, it's the way that we train up the vine. Because if you let them go on their own, they're going to crawl around and climb up something, and they'll go forever. And the fruit that's way far away from the trunk doesn't get so ripe. So we figured out many years ago, ancients, they have been figured it out for a long time. If you keep the fruit right close to the trunk, okay, and I'm using tree talk there, and you get the fruit fuller of all the energies that come out of the plant. So we prune everything back every year. So talk about, you're doing what we call head prune.
Yep.
And let's talk about that with Sangiovese and why particularly. It looks kind of like a tree, if you will.
Yeah, it looks like a little ornamental tree, and
Right.
that's what we decided. The fashion we were going to grow these vines up. Doc wanted to keep it ornamental, if you will, keep them short. It allowed us to compress a little bit the area to get some more vines on the property in the area that we had to work with. Also, too, it made it easier in terms of the cost out of pocket to what you were going to invest into putting up the trellising and all that sort of stuff.
So I'm going to interject just a second for those who are not familiar with. When you drive through any of the areas where you see wine grapes being grown, you'll notice that they look like either an upside down L or like a T, and that's the way we train out the vine to grow. And then we have a whole system of guy wires and poles by which we train up where the leaves are going to be brought on the canes or the branches. We literally place them where we want and get the kind of coverage of the canopy or the makeup of all the leaves necessary. And so there's a lot of different ways to do that. And in this case, they're putting them where they can put a little closer together, and you don't have all the wires and trellising, so that's a lesser cost. And literally it looks like, in the dormant season, it'll look like a dead tree stump, right? And prune it all the way back. But it takes up a little less space, but also can give you quite luscious fruit at the same time.
Absolutely. And what's the style? Correct me if I'm wrong, Doc. Gobelet. It's kind of Gobelet. It's kind of like almost like a wine glass, right? You kind of train it up like a little ornamental bush. And we have some elevation in the property there, and for harvest, you kind of want to make it easy for the folks doing the harvest to get in and out, and it's worked out quite well.
Well, I do have to say, because pictures these days are everything, so I did sneak around on your property and take some lovely shots of your vines, and so when we get ready to launch the podcast, we'll put some pictures out there as well.
Fantastic.
So people can get a little feel of what we're talking about. And I always I'm a wannabe farmer. I have a number of grapevines in my backyard, but I've been working in the industry for many years, and I hang out with a lot of wine grape people like Dr. Ferro, but particularly we have the Small Wine Growers Association in the Temecula Valley. And if you're a wannabe anywhere, well, at least it's convenient for you to drive anywhere in Southern California, on the second Monday of every month at 6 p.m. in the Grand Ballroom of Wilson Creek Winery. A whole mess of us, and I mean, when I say a whole mess of us, this past Monday, which was the second Monday of August, we had close to 100 people
Wow.
there. Some are wannabes like me. Others are growing grapes and selling them to wineries. Others are making home wine, and others are just seeing if they can do it. And every once in a while, you will get some genuine wine people like our Mr. Steve Chapin. He pops in occasionally if there's a guest talking about interesting things. The goal, though, is to learn how can you plant and grow the best grapes for making wine possible. And there's challenges in there. And so we just like to pass the passion along, okay? But you don't have to grow grapes to drink a glass of wine. You just have to enjoy the glass of wine, right? So that's what we should do right now. I'll take a sip and turn it back over to Rafael. So,
Yeah, and you had made the question that I kind of got us sidetracked on about
Right.
what my next steps are and aspirations for this project. Well, you know, I've got some images in the can, as they say, that I can forward you of harvest on the property.
oh, right.
Because I'm getting ready to launch the website, the NavarroFamilyVineyards.com, and that's how I'll sell this wine out into the public. And that's really it. I didn't have a huge plan to commercialize and
Right.
make $1 million.
Right.
You
Well,
know,
it costs, well, even if you get a little tasting, it still costs
listen,
a lot to make that work.
and like my dad once said, you know, he told me, he goes, son, it takes money to make money.
Yep.
You know, so, you know, if you've got something you want to do and you're going to do it right, it's going to cost time and money. So the plan wasn't really conceived in money. It was just conceived in doing something good that I could enjoy, that I could share with friends and family. That's the intent and the spirit of this project, is just getting the best juice in the bottle that can be enjoyed. But again, you know, reality does set in, especially,
Right.
you know, now that I've decided to retire from the tire business. You know, there's plenty of wine stored up, and we started this in our first vintage is 2015.
Mm-hmm.
The project started buying Sangiovese grapes from two small little vineyards in Temecula, very close to my home. That's what we're having tonight. We have then graduated on.
Yes.
We moved after the first year to sourcing a Brunello clone that was being grown out of Mount Palomar.
Okay. And I just, once again, I want to interject here and say, when we're talking about sourcing a clone, wine grapes, when we repropagate them, we cut little twigs, literally, from the branches, or the canes, as we would call them. And in the dormant season, we can cut those in about an 8 or 12-inch little sprig, throw them in a bucket of water, and by bud break time in March, guess what? They're looking just like they've been planted in the ground. But they got to be nursed along because they're in a bucket of water, and then we're going to put them in the ground with some special soil and some routinizing powder and baby these along and super saturate them till they get some roots. And then that little vine cutting that we took from somewhere else, we would call that a clone.
Yep.
And that's what we're talking about, popping in the ground, and that's what he did. So,
Yeah, so I started the project working in that fashion, sourcing grapes locally in the Temecula Valley, which gave me time then to research and order my vines and have them shipped in. And then we planted year-old vines. Okay, so again, that takes time for them to be, like you said, describe the process. They grow
Right.
them up in the ground for about a year, right? So you then put in a not quite mature, but it's rootstock, and it
Right.
gives you better chance for them to
and
take
when
root.
when I mentioned sprouting its own roots, lots of times when we go professional, we order them up with where they grafted onto special kinds of rootstock that are much hardier or been bred against certain kinds of local diseases. So that gets a little more complex, but
And-
in general, we kind of hit the
and
spot.
the rootstock
Yeah.
then can be tailored to the type of soil terroir you're going to plant in.
That's amazing stuff.
which is what we did on this project.
Uh-huh.
So in the meantime, while I was getting all that work done with Doc Ferro, we ended up long-term sourcing a block of Sangiovese from Mount Palomar, which is featured in our 16 and 17 vintages.
Okay.
So where we are today, we are now making estate wine, pulling fruit only from our planted vineyards, and that's what we're making now.
So it's going to be
today.
just exclusive estate.
That's what I'm focused on now.
That's great.
So what we're getting ready to put in the market is 2015.
Mm-hmm.
So from there, we've been producing every year thereafter. So it's a nice inventory that's seasoned and I think ready to put into the market.
And when we use terms like estate, folks, and technically in our industry, although there's some malleations you can do to it, if you grow it on your property, vint it, or turn it into wine on your property, and then bottle it on your property, that would officially be an estate wine. Now, when you're a smaller operation, you may not get all of those ducks in the row, but for the most part, this fruit's all coming from your hand and thumbprints all over your vines.
Yes, at least from 18 on it is.
Yes.
Okay, from 18 on to today, and we're quite happy with what we have. It's been interesting to see the effects of the climate over especially over the last 3 years.
Mm-hmm.
We have played around with a little bit of different barrels that we've been using. We're mainly French oak because we're staying true to a classic Brunello style.
Right.
But we have played with some Garbolotto barrels. We've played with some American oak just to see the little nuance that brings into the taste. And, overall, I think we're quite happy and proud of what we have in the bottle today. And I think that we won't make any huge departures. We're quite happy with where we're at. And again, we're not chasing volume or huge distribution.
Right. You're chasing quality.
That's what this
and
is
for
about.
wine drinkers who like at least to think that they know good wine, when you've had a wine talk show for 15 years, you get to drink wine that you don't necessarily be able to afford, because if, like, you came into the studio here, you better show up with a bottle of wine or we can't talk about it.
Well, these are the opportunities you need to take, because I did an enology certification, and I got to spend some time with some really fun people, and one of the topics that came up, that's the challenge we have as wine marketeers, right?
Right.
That's the biggest challenge you face with marketing wine.
Well, communicating to folks why you're
the challenge,
why Navarro family.
Well, the challenge that we have in marketing wine is that it's trapped inside the bottle. So you got to get it out of the bottle. So that's why I'm like, hey, anytime you move,
now hold on.
Show up.
Hand me. Where's the bottle with the cork out of it? Here, hand me
right
that.
Here.
So here, folks, listen. Yes, we're going to untrap the wine. There we go. We just untrapped the wine. So we took care of that problem.
And so that's the challenge we have, and one thing that I think I need to bring full circle is, how did this connection with Doc Ferro after so many years come together? Again, I had touched on the fact that I got to have a wonderful career with Pirelli, the Italian tire manufacturer that is all things, and it's so much more than just a tire brand. But in that immersion in Italian culture, I was invited to a Christmas party in Temecula at a mutual friend's home. And Doc was there, and we reconnected after many, many, many years and started talking about what I had been up to.
But let's dial back a little bit, because you're leaving some of the story out, because your dad knew Dr. Ferro's
yes, they
dad,
were very
right?
good friends.
Yes, and so there's a long time connection here. So
Well, the roots go back to the Ferro family, and the Ferro family bringing viticulture into Baja California.
Right.
My father grew up.
So the whole Guadalupe Valley down there, folks. If you've heard all the noise coming out of there, they have their roots down there.
This man's family is what was helped get that going, and that's where it becomes very, very interesting. So I didn't just fall off the back of a truck and decide I wanted to make wine. I did, there are some agrarian roots in my family. So my father grew up in Mexicali, and his father was a farmer. Fast forward to today, the family business that I'm now helping and doing work with is the largest family-owned vegetable and fruit producer and packer in Baja California.
Awesome.
So there are
Wow.
agrarian roots. So I didn't just show up and had some,
I think
some
I'm
money
gonna
in
make
my
wine.
piggy banks that said, "Hey, I just want to make wine." There's a little bit in the blood, in the family blood. So I do
Hold
have
your
a
thought for a second. Yes, folks, you're listening to the brand new podcast. Hi, I'm Leroy Guilford, your host. And actually, we're in the lovely studio in Carlsbad, California, where we are making the maiden voyage of the Spill the Wine podcast, and we're definitely spilling the wine and the beans on the wine. That's the idea that we're going to do weekly, and just to try to help you understand and have fun with what it is to enjoy wine, and the folks who bring the passion of well, in this case, growing it and making it, but I love to have the people who cook with it and the people who sell it. And we're going to have all kinds of fun, different areas in which we explore. And speaking of selling it, we're going to go back to, because we were started to get there, this next dive is the marketing end, since everything's ready to go. Let's talk about that.
Yeah, so that's the challenge I have now.
Yes.
Is to get this into the market and move it out of cold storage, because cold storage costs money.
Yes, yes. Now, bottle time for wines is a good thing, but at some point in time, it needs to get untrapped from the bottle and into people's palates, right? So, yes. So, what is your timeline that you're thinking of at this point in time? And you can be general because you're, and what would that venue be?
No, I think the time is now. I think I'm actually overdue. I mean, we can thank COVID for this year and a half time out. We were set to take my 15 and the 16 vintage to a wine exhibition in Ensenada, and we were getting ready for that right as COVID came upon. We thought at that point, right before 19 that. The wine was ready. It had rested and it was ready to go. It has sat in cold storage an extra year and a half. So I think
that's not a bad thing.
No, it's.
Bottle time's a good thing.
I think a wine a wine like this doesn't hurt it. Obviously it doesn't have an eternal shelf life.
Right.
So I think the time is upon me now to make the move and get it out there. And I think. If you look at whatever your opinion may be of COVID, post-COVID, Delta variants, et cetera, whatever it is, I know for sure that during the COVID timeout, I drank quite a bit of wine.
No, there's good to be found in everything that happens in life, especially if you can sip some wine to it. So,
Absolutely.
All right, let's talk about, you mentioned that you're going to have a website.
Yes.
What will that eventually be, and when are you planning on turning the switch on?
It'll be the NavarroFamilyVineyards.com.
Okay.
I currently have all of the verbiage for the site. I have a lot of imagery. I'm simply waiting right now on some product shots to fill the pages of the site. It'll be very simple, tight, to the point. And I'm thinking hopefully within the next 30 to 60 days it'll be live.
So let me ask you another thing, and this is just leave a little stirring of the pot. So what if there's some yummy Italian restaurants out there and they go, wow, a Brunello Sangiovese from Southern California. I might be interested in putting that in my restaurant. So would you entertain those kinds of inquiries?
Absolutely.
Right.
I'm an equal opportunity businessman. So I like to have an open mind.
Super. Well, this has been the maiden voyage, folks. Yes, this is Spill the Wine, and we've been definitely spilling the wine into the glass and into our palates and out of our brain into yours, hopefully. Now the challenge is to get the wine out of the bottle into your glass. And every week, that's what we'll be here doing. We're going to explore just a lot of fun of what it is to enjoy wine, how it comes about, and where you can snatch it up, okay? And I want to give thanks to my son, Roland. He's the engineer here in his lovely new studio, and we are giving it its break-in along with this podcast. And I have an email address. It's been a long time. If you want to give any comments or feedback, it's myrvguy, like radio value guy, myrvguy at AOL.com. And I'd be glad to respond to you. Or, maybe you're a person interested in winemaking, or maybe you're a winemaker too, and you want to tell your story, holler at me. And those are the kind of fun things I love to explore. And I'm sure that those who are tuning in right now, or downloading, I'm used to the radio waves, So, yes, tuning in. I guess you could tune in on your podcast, right? Would want to find out those fun things? That's what we're going to be doing every week. All righty, that sounds like it for the maiden voyage of Spill the Wine.